Hi, and welcome back to another bonus lecture for this course. And I get a lot of questions between homeowners and contractors and developers on the difference between point source drip irrigation and inline drip irrigation, and why I, as a designer, would choose one over the other. What are the advantages of point source over inline and vice versa? So what I want to do is take a look at a couple of different designs that I've done. This first one we've looked at in an earlier bonus lecture, but I also have one that is inline. So I've got a point source and an inline that we're going to take a look at, and I want to just kind of walk through the pluses and minuses on each of these so that in your designing or installing your own drip irrigation system, you can at least have an understanding of why one might be preferential to you as opposed to another installation. Okay, let's take a quick look at the board. So here's the point source irrigation design I put together that we saw in an earlier bonus lecture. And just to refresh your memory, these are 1 gallon sized plants, this symbol here. These symbols represent 5 gallon. These symbols represent 15 gallon. So when these plants go in the ground, the canopy of the plant is going to be probably a little bit greater, equal to or greater than the root diameter of the pot that these plants are in. Now I have an emitter schedule that I showed you in an earlier bonus lecture, where for a 1 gallon plant, I'd use a 1 gallon per hour flow rate, and that pretty much takes care of an average diameter of 1.5 feet, canopy diameter of the plant, which gives me 1.77 square feet in area, and a precipitation rate of 0.909 or 0.91. I can balance that with 4 gallons per hour for a 5 gallon plant, and average diameter of the canopy is roughly 3 feet. These are actual measurements I took at a local nursery. I went out with my tape measure and got this. So I've got some kind of a starting point. I know they're going to be different with different plants. They're going to be different where you're working and what plants you're working with. This is a guide, it's not a straitjacket. So use it in that sense. And then 15 gallon plants and 24 inch, by going 6 gallons per hour or 10 gallons per hour, again, I can match my precipitation rates by the average square footage of area. So that's all well and good when you first put these in the ground. But what's going to happen after the first year? Well, these 5 gallon plants, these 1 gallon plants, they are going to be maturing and growing. Now, in landscape design, we're showing these plants at roughly mature size on the plan, even though in reality they're going to be smaller when they go in the ground, because you want to be able to accommodate the actual mass of the plant within the landscape and not have it overplanted. So even though these may be shown at close to mature size, the fact is the roots of these plants are going to continue to grow out into the landscape, getting extra nutrients, going for extra water. And if we don't change the emitter schedules, if we don't add emitters to these different plants as they grow, then these roots are going to be well beyond where those emitters have been placed, and consequently these plants are going to experience some form of stress, particularly in the summer months or in extremely hot conditions. So in point source drip irrigation, you are technically watering the plant itself, not the ground area around it. You're trying to get enough water to these plants to where they're going to be an acceptable health and vigor for whatever your needs are. Now, what's the difference between this and doing an inline irrigation installation? Let's take a look at one of those. Okay, so here is a design I put together, and each of these vertical lines represents an inline drip emitter line, and these rows are scaled at 18 inches apart, and the emitters are on 18-inch spacing within the tubing itself. So I've got all of this coming in These darker little triangles represent tree bubblers, because trees are going to have a different watering requirement than the shrubs that are out within the landscape. So I'm going to keep them on their own valve. That's depicted right here. Got my line coming up, coming over, and watering the different trees. So I can irrigate them separately from the overall shrub planting areas. Now the difference between point source and inline is that I have accounted for this area of the landscape in square footage. This valve right here is coming up and irrigating all of this. As the plants grow, the roots are going to continually find water within the landscape because I'm watering the whole area. I'm not just watering an individual plant and then having to come back to it potentially and add extra emitters and trying to manage my irrigation that way. So that's the difference. Point source, I'm watering individual plants. Inline, I'm watering a square footage area. Point source, if I want to keep those plants happy and healthy and thriving over time, especially if we get an extremely hot summer, then I need to add additional emitters to that individual plant and bring those emitters further from the trunk of the plant to be able to accommodate where that root zone is. With inline, that's already been accounted for. Another difference, with inline, I know how much water I am pumping into that particular hydrozone, that particular valve zone, and it's not going to change. With point source, if I'm adding more and more emitters to my landscape to one valve zone, it is possible I'm going to exceed the design capacity for that individual valve, that individual area, because I may not actually have enough gallons. That's probably a rare situation, but the potential is there. The other side of this is cost. Everything's going to cost. With point source, you're running your 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch blank drip line, and you're coming off of that with 1/4 inch distribution tubing and running one or multiple lines to each individual plant. So the materials cost can be quite a bit less, but the labor investment is going to be quite a bit more. It's very labor intensive, and then if you do manage it properly and come back in 1 or 2 or 5 years and start adding emitters, then you're going to have additional labor and materials cost at that point. With inline, you can lay this on the ground, you lay it out in a grid fashion, and you use some kind of a jute staple to hold it into place to keep those lines parallel to each other. And now you've got all of this there, you cover it with a bark or some kind of organic mulch to protect it, and you're irrigating that whole area. Your labor costs are actually going to be quite a bit less. Your materials costs are probably going to be a little bit more, but in the long run, you're going to have less maintenance, and in my opinion, you're going to have a healthier landscape as a result of this. So look at your individual situation. Wait, there's one more thing. With inline, if I choose to add additional plants, it's already accounted for as the system has been laid out. All I have to do is make sure I know where those lines are so I don't sever them with a shovel when I'm digging a hole to put a plant in. With point source, I've got to go back and then run new lines again if I choose to add plants on down the road. So there's the differences, and I just wanted to put that across and give you some food for thought, and that's pretty much it. So I'm going to keep doing different bonus lectures for the different lessons and courses that I have to kind of help flesh some of this out. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this has been useful, and I will see you on down the road.